Hello, this is Burr Stewart, and welcome to another operations video in my long-running series of HO model railroad operations videos. Today we have the highlights from day 3 of SoundRails 2022, which was a operating weekend where we invited people from all over the United States and Canada to come and operate train layouts in the Seattle area. Each operating session lasted about 7 hours, so I've just tried to capture some of the highlights of some of the trains that we ran during all 3 days. The view you're seeing now is an action cam that I had on the side of the room to just capture the chaos of the entire movement, but most of the clips here are going to be from my cell phone close up to the trains, and I'll try to explain what was going on at least part of the time. Over the 3 days, we were operating a single day of prototype schedules and trains. So the transition between the days just amounted to people dropping what they were doing, and then the next day new people came and continued on. In this case, we had just ended running the jet job on day 2, and I got this really great shot of the jet job charging into the tunnel, which represents going up the 5% grade to the Boeing plant at Payne Field in Mukilteo, right when a northbound freight was coming by. How about that? There's nothing we model railroaders like more than blowing our horns. The long train here is a through freight from Seattle, actually starts in California and goes all the way north to Vancouver, British Columbia. Watch for it later. I have some shots of it going across the Samish River north of Mount Vernon in a few minutes. Meanwhile, the jet job train has stopped and is preparing to flip the switch and back into the tunnel, otherwise known as the uphill grade to the Boeing plant. This is a lot like the problem you have when you're rail fanning on the prototype railroads. If you're trying to take a picture of one train and then another train comes in front of it. It's kind of a good news, bad news situation. Those empty gondolas are intended to hold scrap aluminum from the machining and cutting of parts for the airplane assembly. I think at some point aluminum became so valuable that they started hauling them in boxcars rather than open gondolas where the aluminum could be stolen. In another piece of cleanup work from session 2, the Milwaukee northbound coast train is still making its way up to Bellingham, and you see it here passing the Samish River in front of the through freight which you just saw a minute ago. Those of you who've seen my previous videos will know that this trestle and scenery was built by the late Paul Scholes for photos in his book on making realistic scenery for model railroads. If you've read that book, you're familiar with every intimate detail of how this scene was constructed. There's that signature bay window Milwaukee caboose.
I'm stopping here until someone
Right on the Milwaukee's tail, we have our northbound through freight. I think the operator of this train just blew the horn for my entertainment. I don't mind though. I'm happy to be entertained, especially by horn blowing. On day 3, we ran some of the passenger equipment, including the international passenger train between Seattle and Vancouver, and here you see it in the area of the coach yard in South Seattle. While our copper ore cars that we talked about in day 2 are making their way now from Seattle south to Tacoma. The Oiler was a train that ran from Seattle to Everett, doing local switching all the way along. Once in a while, we send it all the way up to Mount Vernon just to take care of some local switching business. In this case, it appears to be bringing a load of coal up to Mount Vernon and the Burlington Yard. I love the sound of that GP38-2, although I'm not sure they would have run that on a local in 1973. Back in the Bayside Yard in Everett, we have what's now one of my favorite locomotives, number 187, a Northern Pacific switcher that was renumbered in the Burlington Northern renumbering scheme to number 187. If you've been watching the videos on my channel, you're absolutely sick of me talking about this engine. In the Stacy Street Yard in South Seattle, some switching was taking place, which it's hard for me to understand here, especially because I don't know why we're hearing the sound of an Alco switcher. There's an RS1 from the Milwaukee Road, but we had finished the Milwaukee work by day 3, so I think somebody just liked RS1s and they grabbed that switcher to do their work in the Stacy Street Yard. That's my suspicion anyway. I can't say as I blame them. That's a cool sounding engine.
Gooch. You want him in D track?
Back at the Emerson Street overpass in the Interbay Yard, it looks like our Oiler local train has arrived, having gone all the way from Mount Vernon down to Everett and now arriving in Seattle. And you can see it has some of the Boeing aircraft parts cars that need to be shipped back to the factory in Wichita, Kansas and other places that supplied Boeing at the time.
They have money anyway, but it was interesting. They were on their way up and all 3 of them slid off the side of the hill right into the river. I thought that was Kirk driving.
Keep an eye on that brown caboose. We'll be putting it in the caboose track in a couple minutes.
I've worked with him for a long time. I think I worked with him on my last day. I wonder if there's a connection.
Alright, let's get him out of here.
Yeah. Really? You got your orders?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Alright, line him out.
Alright. Alright.
Well, this is exciting. Who knew?
Get out of here and don't come back.
Oh, that's a short.
The north or eastbound manifest train is waiting for the Oiler to clear, and now he can pull out.
Yeah, as long as you're clear on both ends at this point.
I'm clear on both ends.
Now, have you got cars from you, or we have cars for you?
Everything's for you. I totally agree.
Alright. So,
A nice combination of GE and EMD power. I'll give you some time to listen to the crews chattering.
And I think there's 18 cars up in Delta.
I know where you're going.
So does that 25 car limit you put those in caboose or not including caboose?
With caboose.
Okay. Superintendent has spoken.
Yeah. So can he take 32 cars up the hill?
No.
Nope. 25? Okay, so just take as many as you can and then up to the 20-car limit.
Alright.
Oh, there it is. Is that it?
I'm on the wrong track.
Well, I don't see what's about to be the crossover there. No, it's not.
You have to go that way and come back on this track.
Maybe up here? The house means there was a Huntington house at one time.
An infinite number of years ago.
First stop along this train's route, of course, well, not a stop, but the first milestone is bridge number 4, the Salmon Bay Bridge, which is just represented here by a double-track Walther's stock bridge. It should be a fancy lift bridge, like I showed you at Kirk Reddy's N-scale layout a few days ago on my YouTube channel.
What's the point in having a crossover if you can't use it once in a while, right?
I've never had a problem watching either SD40-2s or U-boats, frankly.
Yeah, the middle one is the River Aussie.
I would like you to push down almost
Very nice.
Alright, I gotta get on that track behind me.
It turns out this is an eastbound manifest, so that's why they're taking the crossover back to the right-hand main so that they can take the High Line up to Everett's Delta Yard and from there head across the Cascade Mountains towards Spokane and eventually Chicago. On the prototype, this High Line that we've just taken would plunge into a tunnel under downtown Everett, but I don't have room for that on this layout, unfortunately. If you get sick of watching SD40-2s, feel free to skip ahead. I dare you. Okay, now we're entering Delta Yard in the town of Everett, Washington. At this point, the train will stop and pick up a block of cars from Everett and north, which are heading towards the east.
That was your NP and BN.
Back in Interbay, the switcher in 1922 there is about to put away the caboose from the oiler which just arrived a few minutes ago on the caboose track. The caboose in the foreground there is one of the CB&Q cabooses that were painted BN green early in the merger. Really nice looking thing. Those of you that have been watching my channel and my live streams will recognize this area here as a brand new ladder that I just put in over the last 6 months on the north end of the car repair shop. This is the maintenance of way track here with the gondola there with ties. Although I'm not sure what good untreated ties would do the maintenance department, but never mind. That's why I sometimes say this is reality model railroading on this channel. as opposed to prototype fidelity. We do our best, what can I say? This XNP caboose, for example, this has got the correct BN numbers on it and everything.
I'm coming down, so I need to...
Hopefully there's nobody working in that
Stand
green
up and
caboose
check
to
the
be
thing.
knocked off their chair.
I put my brake on, but...
Work with the dispatcher to keep everyone out of the way.
Well,
Yeah.
we're back at the Sandwich River again, this time with a southbound through freight coming out of Vancouver, BC, and heading down towards California with a stop in Seattle. I'm not sure how between yesterday and today that weird stump load got in this train, but never mind, there it is. And I think this is train number 137, if I'm correct.
That sounded fun.
This camera guy has nerves of steel.
The empty auto rack is probably headed back to Detroit for some more automobiles.
All right, I like that. What do they do with my little stuff?
I like the effect of the bright colored freight cars reflecting in the water when you have a river scene like this. It's fun on the prototype and it's fun on this model as well.
I'm not exactly piggyback. You're the piggyback?
All right, I'm back in order again. Back is good.
You can tell this is a train coming down from British Columbia because of all this plywood and lumber coming out of the forests. That last car is one of those newfangled oval center beam cars that they started building in the mid-70s. It's probably a couple of years too late for this layout, but they're so cool I'd run them anyway.
You're supposed to be on main 1 or main 2? Doesn't matter, that's up to you. Where are they? On the head end? Okay, we're going to run your car right behind the locomotives. A long car. Oh, yeah. That's it, that's all I got for you. Okay.
This gives you a little bit of an overview of the Burlington Yard area there, complete with a water main.
You running through?
No, I'm terminating at
Okay.
Palmer.
If you're ever running trains at someone else's layout,
Terminating at
pay
Palmer.
attention to which button will turn on the headlight. You never know when they might be trying to take a video of your train.
You were going
Well,
out. Give us a human going out.
as soon as I become train 88 and you switch cars, yes.
Alright, you changing power?
I'm changing, I don't feel I'm changing power, I'm just becoming train 88.
This train is the famous
After I dump my load.
Intermodal Express number 4, which was the eastbound version of the westbound Pacific Zip, which is train number 3. This was BN's first foray into high-speed expedited intermodal trains, the unit trains. And in the early days of the 70s, it intended to be very overpowered and not have too many cars, which is great for a model railroad. And it also tended to have an express boxcar, which we normally run. For some reason, maybe because we were filming it, I didn't have that boxcar on this run. But in any event, this train is heading for Chicago as fast as it possibly can. Here the train is coming along what we call the low line to the Bayside Yard in Everett. I don't know why it was on the low line because it's supposed to be an expedited train to Chicago. So it should have taken the high line up to Delta and on up. But at least somebody figured out how to turn on the headlight, so we're making some progress. Now if I could just get some decent camera equipment that I could focus on the train, we'd be in business.
Back up a little bit, and your power will go through this crossover. Good. Direction change. Great.
Having negotiated Everett, we're now heading up the hill towards Skykomish, Stevens Pass, and ultimately Chicago.
Burr. No power on the sand stop. He thinks main 2 is a great idea.
A little while later, on the same piece of main line, a manifest freight is climbing up the steep grade towards Skykomish. I think it's about a 2% on the prototype. I think this late on day 3, we're all getting a little punchy. Isn't this the same weird stump load that I just earlier said was on a train heading to California?
How do I know that
And now it's heading east?
Track 1 if I don't drive to this run over there?
That's my recollection.
Yeah, somebody's got to run over there. It's probably not set for track 1. Alright, let me go.
I'm going to go have a talk with the dispatcher. So that kind of wraps it up. I think you can see our train coming into Skykomish in the upper right-hand corner there. While switching continues in the Bayside yard on the left and the Inner Bay Balmer yard on the right. There's that Pacific Zip again.
Oh, that's what one does. What's the bell? Either one or... The one turns on the rear headlight. Okay, so it's 4 then. There it is.
Well, now we're getting an up-close and personal view of the Skykomish staging yard with a coal load there waiting to be restaged into a short open hopper. This was day 3, and I had an open house that evening after the operating session, and a guy came over to take some pictures of trains, and I thought, well, let's run the Pacific Zip the correct direction as train number 3 westbound from Chicago to Seattle. So we took a pass around what we call the Rainbow Bridge, which is a loop out over the aisle, to turn around and head back into the layout, as you can see we're doing here. And then we just reconstituted this run as train number 3, the Pacific Zip. You can see Mount Index in the background there as we leave Skykomish, now heading westbound. Near Skykomish, there was a town called Grotto that had a gravel quarry. So that's what those hoppers are doing there. They're getting loaded with gravel. And there's a local train called the Sky Local that comes up and works that spur. If you look on a map, you'll see that the main line does a almost 360-degree loop right near this mount index, and they call it the index loop. And that's kind of what we do on the layout here too. We go from running towards the right to running towards the left around this loop. The undeveloped property you see below the mountain is the town of Ballard, which is a neighborhood in Seattle with a lot of industries. Aren't you glad we finally got that headlight and rotating beacon turned on? I know I am. This is a skewed deck girder bridge, which is very similar to a highway bridge on the prototype that I've always admired. This part of the east-west main line curves around above the Everett Bayside Yard just to lose elevation. Those RS3s in Bayside are on the point of a train called the Auburn Everett Transfer. Well, now we've dropped down from Skycomish and we're entering Everett's Delta Yard. Only to pick up speed again and pass through, since we're an expedited train that doesn't stop here. This train also passed right past the Inner Bay Yard in Seattle and terminated in Stacy Street, where there was a switch crew called Crew 6 that would take the train apart and immediately put the trailers into the South Seattle Intermodal Yard for processing. And then they would make up the eastbound train number 4, and it would get on its way later in the evening. We're not going to do it today, but sometime I want to make a video of that Crew 6 operation handling the inbound Pacific Zip. I think that would be a lot of fun. I'm not sure why we're running on the left main, but there we are. Well, if you're getting familiar with the layout, you know that we're coming around to the old GN Bridge number 4 across the Lake Washington Ship Canal. That's a stand-in for the Ballard passenger station. And now the engines have crossed the ship canal and are starting to approach the Inner Bay Yard. On the ramp track above it, you can see the rock train that we started running back in the very beginning of
we'll probably
day
stop
2.
this through it,
So with that, we'll just give you a completely different view of the layout, this time from high up above the Skycomish yard, as we were winding down the open house on day 3. And we were just repositioning one of the trains in the Skycomish yard at this point. And in a few more days or weeks, I'll have some more footage to show you of additional repositioning and setup work that we do for operating sessions. But this brings to a close our coverage of the 3-day SoundRails event and the marvelous time that we had with all the visiting operators running trains on the Burlington Northern in 1973. Of course, it was really in March 2022. So I hope you've enjoyed this 3-video tour, and I hope you'll follow my channel and stay tuned for more. In the meantime, this is Burr Stewart wishing you much fun with trains.
properly